And so, okay, here we go. All right, so for anybody watching the recording afterwards, we're back to somewhat normal, so you can potentially skip the first few minutes if you want to, as I'm not going to be going into, quote unquote, official regular stuff. Am I already muted? No. Your AI is starting to fail again. YouTube. We come out here, then we go over here, turn this on. Absolutely. Thank you. Load, load. There we go. Now we go in here. Wow, 4. That was fast. Dismiss. Live chat. Bring up the normal stuff. No, not Google Docs. What am I? Oh, wait, I do need Google. We need Google Earth. That's what we need. Man, my brain is starting to fail me. I can feel age 31 approaching. It's still a few weeks away, but I can feel it coming up. What is... Oh, yeah, that's Atsugi Air Base in Japan, because I was looking at stuff for the whole uh, Battle Los Angeles inspired alien invasion story thing again, which I do almost have the first 5 chapters done. So I will be posting that very soon. Before that, though, probably I'm going to be posting the link as I promised in the community post on YouTube to for anyone who's familiar with Risk. I actually a long time ago, back when I was still living up home in Alaska before my exile began in 2020. For anyone who's familiar with Risk, I actually came up with an alternate set of rules for Risk based on natural resources instead of instead of the regular Risk rules. So now I will be posting those because I figured why not. So I'll be posting a link to those once I have those all typed up. Unfortunately, the Risk map is kind of really weird. Uh, Even for the time that it was created, it was really weird. Like, I don't know why they put so many sections up in the Siberia region and stuff like that, and then like down here, there's like barely anything. But I did the best I could. I am making an alternate map as well. If you want to play with a map with the natural resource rules, with map sections that actually more align with natural resource divisions, I'm going to make one of those. So I'll also post that when I finish that. But anyways, so I'm working on that. The regions as they'll be listed in my natural resource risk rules when I post that link for you are the regions as they exist on the regular traditional risk map, which is almost guaranteed to be the one that you have if you have a copy of the board game Risk. But I will make an alternative map if you want to use an alternative, more fitting map at some point. But I should post that this weekend because that really didn't take that long. I just had to remember them in detail. Always repost the kitties who need homes, and then go over to bookmarks. All right, that's all good. What about okay? Frame rate is good, or bit rate. Let us see. YouTube is not lying and is not saying that I have a horrible bit rate. Excellent. Okay, how long have we been on? Almost 5 minutes. Perfect. I will take one sip of water and then I will start with some lighter stuff to give people just a few more minutes. And then we will go into the really big things. Congested as always. Okay. So, apart from the Israel Lebanon stuff that is upcoming eminently, there is some other stuff going on in the Middle East. So, unlike Putin and Xi Jinping, Erdogan in Turkey is trying to be slightly more covert with his imperial restoration dream. So you guys are probably already aware. We talked about it as it happened. The Turkey, in the shadow of all these other things happening over the last few years, has kind of invaded without, calling it an invasion, a northern strip of Syria, about 20 miles deep, this northern strip up here, to create a so called quote unquote zone of safety, or whatever term they wanted to give it. And now, uh, while no one's really been looking or paying attention, they've kind of also apparently crept into like 1 or 2% of Iraq up in the north. Not just like previously, they would incur Iraqi airspace and conduct airstrikes on Kurdish positions, but now Turkish forces themselves, like on ground, are actually slowly creeping in, and for the moment are in mostly unoccupied or mostly sparsely inhabited regions in like 1 or 2% of the country in the north. But that's gradually, creeping their way in. Erdogan's creeping his way into like, a really modest, bit by bit, covert, in big quotation marks there, covert Ottoman Empire restoration. And up in the north, although Anbar is the real, still completely unexplored portion, up in the north, particularly this section here on the western half of the north, is where a lot of the more recently discovered oil fields in Iraq have been, because that area was previously majorly unexplored until the 2010s. So several of them are up here in the area where Turkish forces have crept into. So, uh, like I, suggested back when I first brought it up, a year or two ago, the reason isn't necessarily like actual, Ottoman Empire restoration, although that is like a narcissistic high he probably wants to ride on, like most rulers do. But the, quote unquote geopolitical actual gain in his and his like cabinet's eyes from creeping in is probably to edge both the Iraqi government and the Kurdish government out of some portion of those oil fields, which are, likely to be decent, have decent production levels and flow rates, and thus have Turkish companies operate those and, you know, get their outputs diverted into Turkey. So, idea is probably to secure a more stable oil supply, as Turkey's oil demand in present day is, for one, still growing, and for two, is already at between 1.2 and 1.3 million barrels per day. And Turkey doesn't have that much oil bearing stuff it can work with. A lot of what it has found and will find is in this here, both on and offshore, and then this bit. And it can, play with this since it controls northern Cyprus, and then a bit in the Aegean, and this portion here on its European part, and then tiny bits of shelf in the Black Sea. They're up to about 100,000 barrels per day of production themselves. They control uh, the oil portions in Syria, uh, whereas U.S. and coalition forces control the natural gas portions. So that's about another 100,000 barrels per day from Syria, which is all that Syria really has left, because Syria is kind of empty oil wise. And they essentially get all of Azerbaijan's oil that Azerbaijan does not consume, at least. So that is, for Azerbaijan's exports, that is about minus, for safety, minus 150. So about 450. So plus the 200 they control, that's about 650. And thus, if they creep their way in here and gain, control over some of those newly discovered fields before either the Kurdish government or Iraqi governments could develop those themselves and thus take control of some of those. Given, the scale of Persian Gulf Basin fields minus Syria, because Syria's stuff was never really impressive, uh, the stuff in the 1 or 2% of Iraqi land that they've crept into would probably be enough once they like actually drill and development for like another 100, maybe 150,000 barrels a day. So that would give them a stable supply of like 800,000 if it were switched on immediately, which it won't be. That will take some time. Uh, Other than that, though, like outside of that, you would then also have to factor in Azerbaijan's continued terminal decline, although they will be getting that upward 100,000 barrel per day boost from that one remaining field that is in their one last part of their Caspian Sea waters that they still have untouched. But after that, Azerbaijan will just continue going definitively downwards. So the, on paper strategic idea behind it is just oil supply guarantee. All right, that should be enough for everyone to show up. Nobody's saying anything chat wise. Okay, so we'll go into this one, the one that's most prominent on everybody's mind for the moment. So, uh, roughly since the start of the year, the deaths from the constant carpet bombing that the IDF has been doing on the Gaza Strip are mostly over, but now they're dealing with the whole uh, piling up of lack of medical attention deaths, which have been about 10,000 since the start of the year of people who would not have died otherwise if there was actually like decent amounts of medical supplies going into the Gaza Strip. So the reported and like on paper death toll from the whole thing of regular Gazans is about like 40,000. The actual death toll is around now probably close to 80 or 90 because there's something like 15,000 to 20,000 people officially missing. And then there's 20,000 plus people who are just like off books now because the way the Gazan like health ministry or whatever or the government like registers people as missing is not really the best. They require someone of some kind of relative, whether a cousin, a brother, a son, a parent, to report somebody or multiple family members as missing to then list them as missing. So on the not officially registered as missing list, there are, 20,000 plus people who effectively, no longer seem to exist, which, just like the people who have been missing for 7 months, that just means they're dead. Then plus these 10,000, then plus the 20,000 plus members of Hamas that have been killed. So the total human like death toll is in excess of 100,000. That of like actual regular Gazans though is around 80, maybe 90, uncertain. And now we have this whole situation, which is growing nearer. As I talked about last week, Israel did a large airwave, not doing strikes during that airwave. They just flew a bunch of aircraft, like F 16s and F 15s, so not stealth aircraft. They flew aircraft that are visible to radar all up and down Lebanon last week in a big wave of like 30 of them across different points, which I'm assuming was probably just to poke around and see if anyone like took a shot with if they're to see if there were SAM systems around, if Hezbollah has like actual SAM systems and or man pads, which they definitely probably do have man pads, and to see if anyone either locked on to them or actually, took a full shot at them so that they would then at least know where those were and also potentially strike them in the same night they uh, if they wanted to do that as well. No reports on like the result of that yet, whether there were any shots taken at the aircraft, but they also just did that again. They repeated that tactic either last night or the night before of sending a couple dozen aircraft over Lebanon, F-16s and 15s, so not the 35s, not the stealth aircraft, and several of them across several areas actually flew really low, like probably only 1 or 2 thousand feet. So again, I'm assuming that was once again probably to try to poke around and see if they got anyone trying to lock on with a manpad or a SAM system. And no official announcements from that of whether there actually were or not. There were, however, uh, as you saw in some of the past streams, as the IDF has been moving its equipment up to the Lebanese border in preparation for all this, a lot of the big howitzers, the effectively clones of the M109 Paladin that they've moved up there, they have now started cross-border artillery barrages. They just started those last night on various Hezbollah positions across the border a few miles into Lebanon. So they are now no longer doing uh, like they're no longer doing the pointed airstrikes throughout random places. They have actually started uh, doing like fire barrages with artillery batteries across the border now. So we have reached that point, and it is the like full massive pre-ground invasion barrage and air campaign. The U.S. agencies have said they expect the IDF to start that in the second half of this month. So that would probably, or obviously that would be, anytime from July 16th through July 31st. But as it was also expected that when Israel did their retaliatory strikes on Iran, that they would do those in like the first week of May. They ended up doing those in, I think, the last week of April instead. So they could, jump the gun and do that sooner. Although there's only like 3 days left for it to be a jump the gun and do it sooner move, or they could wait until like later, like into August. So we'll see whether it actually ends up being the second half of this month. But we have reached the cross-border artillery barrage stage, and as well, Israel did send several IDF jets up across the Syrian coast up here and did hit several Syrian military air defense sites, SAM systems, to obviously make sure that those don't take shots at them while they're doing stuff inside of Lebanon, as they also have already struck several actual Syrian army positions and things down in southwestern Syria as well, as both a precautionary measure and also like a message to Assad to like not do anything when they eventually invade southern Lebanon. So that has been ongoing, and also uh, the reason so few people get killed in the like large rocket barrages from initially Hamas and now Hezbollah is because most of those are remember unguided rockets. So they basically those who fire the rockets like aim them at an angle to land in a given area. Hopefully, they hope. If the wind is off, if they miscalculated the angle, it could go anywhere. But even if it lands like where they want it to, it's still over like a widespread area. So the chance that it's gonna like hit somebody or like a vehicle somebody's in is not that great. They have hit a few people, and most recently, they hit some more people. They actually had a hit on a moving vehicle, and this couple that got killed more than anybody else who's been killed apparently sparked like national outrage. I'm not particularly sure why they sparked national outrage while like the other like people who got killed at different points didn't, but they sparked national outrage when they got killed, and now the populace, although they do the general population is in a mixed bag of like opinion results. If you look at it, they want they want the IDF to leave Gaza. They don't want the Gaza stuff to continue. They want Netanyahu to leave. They don't like Netanyahu or anybody else in his government, but they do want the IDF to go into southern Lebanon and go to war with Hezbollah apparently. And these two particular people that died in this case have gotten the population screaming at the Israeli government about its lack of action against Hezbollah, despite the fact that they've been constantly airstriking Hezbollah and are now like doing cross-border artillery barrages and stuff. So that's just a that's a media thing that Netanyahu can now use, on his end of saying, "Hey, look, the people are screaming for blood." So clearly, this is a smart decision, and I should go ahead with it. And what else do we have in here? Oh, yeah, we also had, I think this was one of the recent things I bookmarked too. Ah, yes. So me speaking on part of the US, are moving the Theodore Roosevelt supercarrier over here to the Middle East. Whether we're going to set it up here or here or here, I don't know. But since one of our carriers, the Eisenhower, I believe, is heading back to Norfolk, we are bringing in the Theodore Roosevelt to make sure we're maintaining the three carrier strike group presence policy for when we think, things might happen. So we're rushing to get that in before the IDF actually goes into southern Lebanon. And also, though, you know, Israel is probably willingly waiting on that to arrive on their part as well before they then choose to go into southern Lebanon. But the point of that isn't like worry about the IDF versus Hezbollah. That's because of the whole potential that Iran chooses the side of the 50-50 because they've had a 50-50 track record of backing up their threats recently. If they choose the 50-50 side of the coin where they do back up their threats and they do try to launch, some like massive 1,000 ballistic missile barrage towards Israel, then we want to have a lot of stuff around. And also, if they do something of that scale, Israel is definitely going to do the whole massive air campaign against Iran. Because, as I've said before, that's why they took out all of those early warning radar sites in southern Syria. Because, if they were only ever going to do retaliatory small strikes with the F-35s, then there would be no reason to take those out. If you took those out, that implies you are potentially intending to use your larger air fleet of F-15s and F-16s, which are not stealth. They are not invisible to radar. So you would kind of want the radars to be gone before you send those along a pathway. But I also suspect even if Iran only does a small thing, Israel's still going to do a massive like air launched cruise missile campaign against Iran, anyways, no matter what. But Iran could pick the 50-50 side of the coin where they do nothing because they've also, picked that side multiple times. However, in this particular case, if the IDF like actually, is pushing into southern Lebanon, that might that they might view that as too much of a corner to be backed into to where they could like really choose to not do anything. So they will probably feel like they have to do something. If they choose, the don't do anything side of the coin, it will probably just be in actuality like doing a lesser version of something. So they would probably do, a couple hundred ballistic missile and suicide drone barrage like they did last time back in like February or March or whenever it was. But even if they did something smaller like that, I highly suspect the IDF would still do the or will still do the whole massive aerial campaign against Iran anyways, especially since they've now changed the nuclear rhetoric again. So as we've spoken of in the past, it's gone through several stages. It's always been Iran could probably make nukes in like a year or two. And then after all of this started, once we hit like November, the rhetoric started shifting from everybody towards Iran could probably make one in just a few months now. And then earlier this year in like February, it switched to Iran's really close. They could have a nuke in just a couple weeks. Then this spring it switched over to Iran could probably make a nuke in less than a week. And then at the end of spring in May, it switched over to Iran could probably get a nuke in like 2 days. And now, most recently, just yesterday or the day before, the most recent, rhetoric assessments that have come out from everybody are that Iran has actually already made all the stuff. All they have to do is snap it together like a Lego piece. So they're getting like as close to the threshold as they can with that, which is, part of why I'm like heavily suspicious that no matter what Iran does as a response to the IDF invading southern Lebanon, the IDF Air Force is still going to do the massive air campaign against Iran, anyways, because they've been heavily working up that whole reason for action. I think that is. Oh, wait, no, that's not everything. Let me check chat though. No, it's not. You don't get to say things on part of the people there who are saying it's not. Like if 2 out of 3 parties say it's not, then it's not. Like, I'm sure, you know, Russia would also love to say that its presence in Ukraine is in, full like desire of the Ukrainian people, but it's not. Also, when you're bombing Kurds, you're not in cooperation with the Kurds. That's not how that works. And we also said in 2003 that our presence in Iraq was like with the cooperation of the Iraqi people. That's not how it works. Vietnam also wanted everybody in there as well, all the different parties who went in and out of there across the decades. The one other thing here, down, 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 down. There we go. Is one of Iran's few functional, worthwhile ships, not that that's saying much, tipped over in port down here in Bandar Abbas, tipped over and then sank. So this was without any like action by an outside force. This was entirely on port mishandling while while a cargo ship was like backing into its position. It was not maneuvered correctly and ended up backing in to this Iranian frigate and, kind of just pushed it over and also gashed it. So water leaked in and sunk it. So that's gone. And as we passed it by on the way down here, yeah, we had another round of this. We've reached the point where, like I said, next year was always going to be the year of highest probability, but there was, still the 50-50 that they might go for it this year. Uh, However, we've reached the point where we're pretty solidly in the not going for it 50 for this year because by now China would have to have actually like been moving stuff into like free amphibious launching position along the coast of the Fujian province, which they have not done. So they would have to, at the very least, be starting to do stuff now, for like in a serious measure, which they're not. They are still doing uh, more practice runs of everything though, and basically are doubling the amount of stuff that they're doing each year consistently since 2020, with another one of these, which is a massive air sortie wave practice, sending this particular time 66 aircraft in one go over the course of a few hours, going basically in this like sweeping arc along like this towards Taiwan, but not like going over Taiwan. And the purpose of the close ups, like I've said before, because of the heavy likelihood from both sides of EW and guidance jamming stuff to be happening or GPS jamming during the actual conflict, the purpose of doing these, close ups, these arcs or swipes like this, is what I'm just going to refer to as terrain recognition practice. So when Chinese pilots, get sent up in sorties during the actual real deal to go strike this and this target, they'll have, done these practice flybys of Taiwan beforehand for a few years. They'll actually, like, have visual recognition in mind of what's where along the Taiwan coast, so that in the absence of, GPS, because everybody's going to be doing, EW and GPS jamming during the actual event, they'll still be able to roughly find their target areas without like direct precision help. So that is the general point of doing these like swipes and flybys. So they're continuing with the practice runs, but it's looking pretty solidly like we're into the negative 50% chance for this year. Next year is again the most likely year because it would be the best chance. If they wait until next year, their third amphibious transport and landing fleet will be completed. They'll have, a few dozen more large civilian ferries converted into, military carrying mode. That's been seen on like satellite imagery constantly, that they've, bolted and welded like SAM systems to the roofs of numerous ferries. And we've also just straight up seen them publish videos of them unloading amphibious, landing track vehicles from the backs of ferries on beaches down along the area. And also, they will have I think it's why everyone knows about the J-20. It's not the best stealth fighter. It's not really that stealth, but it is, better than not stealth fighter. So they now have uh, about as many of these as we have of the F-22. And they're, that was part of the waiting aim is to have like a better number of these. And also, another key thing, I think it's the Y-12. Okay. Chinese. Does that help? No. Okay. Is it the Y-20? Do they just, they really do just do label everything as 20. Okay. So, this is the Y-20. They're dubious clone of the C-17. Clone of the C-17 because it literally is a clone of the C-17. Like that actually was a whole trial and everything. They actually espionaged the blueprints. They did do different engines because they were not able to get the engine specifics. So they had to go with their own engines, which are kind of just semi-modernized copies from the IL-76 engines. But that's, story for another day. So originally back in 2021, they only had like 30 of these. Now they have a bit over 100. These are called planes like this and like the C-17 are called strategic airlifters, which the point of is to be able to rapidly, within like an hour, deliver or within a few hours deliver, additional forces and supplies into a at least partially controlled slash partially contested area, whereas, sending the larger bulk via sea or via like overland land train routes will take a lot of time to both get it like ready and then get it off on both ends and for transit. So part of the other thing they've been waiting for is to have like at least a decently sized strategic airlifter fleet so that in the event of them succeeding at gaining some kind of foothold in Taiwan, they'll have a strategic airlifter fleet to be able to rapidly get stuff in and out with, and not because they want to like use 100 at a time, but because they're giving them the benefit of the doubt, assuming I'm assuming they're not stupid and that they actually expect they're probably going to lose a lot of them. So that's another one of their waiting aspects is they've wanted to wait apart from the having the amphibious transport and landing fleet ready is they also wanted to wait until they have a decent strategic airlifter fleet. So by next year they might theoretically have like 140, 150, which is okay-ish. Then they do still have some older airlifters like the IL-76 things that they inherited from the Soviet Union, which are not in the best condition. Let me make sure I'm remembering correctly. It is the IL-76, right? Yes. Okay. Uh, yeah, this ancient thing. It's not really the best thing to be running with, but if it's all you have, it's all you have. So that's another one of their waiting aspects or what they've been waiting for. Then the reason in particular for wanting to go next year, apart from having all that stuff at like at least minimal desirable levels, is for one, because also if they wait too long, like too far into the late 2020s, we will have given Taiwan too much stuff. Like we've already started offloading Abrams onto them and HIMARS and NASAM systems and additional Patriots and Avenger SAM systems. They really love those. They have hundreds of those all over the island. We're giving them soon the much more modernized, the newest batch of the or newest block class of the F-16s, and just additional anti-air missiles and air-to-air missiles and air-to-ground missiles, air-to-surface missiles. So part of that as well for not wanting to wait too long, even though waiting longer would mean they develop more stuff for this. If they wait too long, they'll be in a position where Taiwan, in their eyes, has too much stuff and this the chance of this succeeding will drop realistically from like 10% down to -50%. Although those speaking to Xi Jinping are probably, telling him that the chance of it succeeding, is maybe closer to like 50%, because if if he and or other decision makers, if there really are any, were really aware of the actual chance of it succeeding, no matter how delusional you've gotten, you wouldn't really be able to actually like make that decision with a sound mind. But uh, obviously, he has to be being told it has a better chance than it does because they're prepping it, and also they've continued the whole constructing replicas. I think it's in this lake here, uh, this one out in Qinghai, since it's pretty far away from a lot of stuff, or maybe this one. They've been constructing like replicas of uh, of Taiwan's like coastal bases and different like cities and stuff, and setting up targets in like positions they suspect Taiwan might put like air defense assets, and they've been having their pilots and those who launch cruise missiles from ships. Just in this case, their practice things are onshore stuff. They've been having them all like practice targeting those things, those replicas that they built. So they've been going through like the whole lot of it, getting ready for this. But we're past the point now, or we're just about past it, where the 50-50 coin flip for this year is pretty definitively a no. Uh, Next year, we, go higher than a 50-50 chance. We, start hitting the, especially since next year is the most likely or, best choice if they were to do it. Next year jumps up to like 70/80, but obviously we'll see. All right, who else did we have? Okay, one other thing before we go into economic data, most of which is good news this time. So you remember uh, two streams ago, it was all bad news mostly. Then last time it was half and half. Now it's mostly good stuff. But in other war related news, the anti junta forces continue pushing the junta back all over the place. The creep into the valley is progressing. I think we had something here, or was it further down? Yeah, so the junta, or sorry, the anti-junta forces have now started making use of the artillery that they got from the that base that they overran last week, or technically it was 2 weeks ago, but I reported on it last week. And because I know the question probably comes up, how do they, if they got the stuff, that's all well and good, but do they know how to use it? Yes, because remember, uh, off and on, a large part of this, the Myanmar's military dictatorships, military off and on over the decades has been by force. So it's been off and on, like conscription, forced service. And so a lot of the people in the rebel groups, in the resistance, are people who were formerly in the actual military, including some who know how to use the artillery systems that they captured at that base 2 weeks back. So now they're actually getting to make use of those artillery systems. I think they were decent ones. They're like the 155s or 152, since they're old Soviet ones. So that would the Soviets did a lot of 152 instead of 155, but they're so they should be 152 millimeters as opposed to like smaller things like 105 or even 90. Since a lot of the stuff's old, there probably would still be some like 90s stuff in there. But they're getting to make use of those now, and that is aiding with their progression. They overran another junta base where the Myanmar government's military kept rocket stuff, like, for MLRS, like in their case, mostly old Soviet M21 Grad systems. But unfortunately, this time, the junta seems to have learned their lesson because the personnel at the base, or it might have just been the personnel acting on their own initiative, they, drove the M21 Grad vehicles, the actual launcher vehicles, away from the base and like fled before the resistance actually took it over. So they did leave the ammunition behind, a lot of the M21 rocket ammo, but that's effectively useless to the resistance because they don't have the launchers for it. However, it's also useless to the Myanmar military dictatorship because, they left it behind, so now they can't use it. But, uh, and anyways, it's another official base overrun, and, it's at least something confiscated out of the junta's arsenal. Not that the resistance can use it because the soldiers at that base actually did like take the vehicles and fled with them instead of just leaving everything and fleeing the base, which is what they've done the previous three times. So, partially unfortunate news in that regard because it means they might be learning slightly. But again, it also might just be a one time fluke. These particular government troops at this one base might have just been, smarter than average. So, as more bases continue falling to the resistance, we'll see if that pattern continues or if it was just a one time thing. Okay, let me chug some water. And then, before we do Russia, Ukraine, and Sudan as well, because we got some grim news out of Sudan, we'll do the economic stuff, of which we have a bit. It looks like I did not write down as much as I had actually bookmarked, though. So that's unfortunate. But I will potentially start doing additional types of videos on the channel once per quarter, maybe, since that's how economics tends to run the years by quarters. Maybe I'll do it once a month if there's enough stuff. But I'll start actually doing like videos at least once a quarter about like uh, you know good economic news, positive economic developments. Since predominantly all you will see in mainstream media is negative developments, and by all means, outside of economic like development and countries rising in income and stuff, uh, things are predominantly negative in quite a lot of places right now. But mainstream media, tends to stay 99% negative simply because, and I actually talked about this in the that essay I wrote, if you guys remember, about part of all the different reasons that have contributed to declining global fertility rates. Part of the reason they do that, which the constant doom posting for the last 50 years of mass media, part of the reason they do that is because you, yes, you, the viewer listening right now, will pay attention to that more. Not because you find it more interesting, although some of you might be sadists, but the actual reason is because it's an instinctive response. It is a defensive survivalist instinct inside you that crops up if you see something like that, like this war erupts over here, or inflation goes from 4% to 4.5%. The economy is doomed. The reason you will lock onto that more and give them more viewership and thus more money is because an instinct fires in your mind that has been around forever, back when you constantly had to jump and pay attention to every noise, every rustling of the bushes or the tree line, uh, you know to, get prepared. Is it an invading tribe? Is it a tiger? Is it a mountain lion? Is it just a tree falling? Did some of the kids wander out of the village and are potentially about to go get lost in the woods? It's a lingering instinct that has not left us from back when every second of our lives was survivalism. So that is still in your mind. That has not left your subconscious brain after all these hundreds of generations. So nowadays, that takes the form of causing you to immediately lock on to, hyper all caps, bold font negative news because your mind is telling you, pay attention to this, check it real quick. Is this a threat? Is the family in danger? Granted, the danger now has evolved into, for most of us in many parts of the world, financial danger. But in other parts of the world, it is actually still legitimate threat of death and harm danger. But in huge chunks of like the rest of the world, Americas, Europe, uh, East Asia, most of it, even India, for the most part, it's now the harm you're going to face is financial harm, but your brain does not really differentiate that. Okay. Get that copycat trash off the screen. Anybody there? They not. Well, I'm sure. I'm sure. Like the Chinese military brass know that it's effectively impossible and doomed to fail. The issue is, remember, uh, even if you have smart like generals around, it doesn't really matter. I mean, that this was literally a thing with like Hitler as well. Uh, and like even if they do know that, they're not the ones in control. Some of them did try to take control, although China really suppressed evidence of that coup attempt. I think it was in late 2022. Someone attempted a coup, like a few generals, and then it that got buried and deleted, and the government came out and said that news was fake. No such thing happened. However, then, like a few days later, several PLA generals were suddenly executed for, various random treason crimes. Just, not attempting a coup, just random, assorted acts of miscellaneous treason. So what that actually means is they did try a coup and it failed. So unfortunately, even if they're smart enough to know this won't work, it doesn't matter because Xi Jinping wants it to work and thus is, just going to tell them to do it and make it work. So you can be as you can have like as smart of guys as you want, but if the one who's actually running things asks for something different, then it's not going to matter. Like this has also happened repeatedly in Ukraine. Like Russia, as much as we may make fun of Russian generals, many of which deserve it, especially like Shoigu. Since he's not even really a general, he's Putin's like best friend from like childhood or high school or whatever that he just appointed to like a defense cabinet position. Russia did have a particularly smart general, the guy who built the whole 2 mile like deep minefield defense line, Surovkin, the guy everyone on the internet names the defense line after. Surovkin was actually really smart, and or is a really smart military strategist if he is still alive. Haven't really heard from or about him, not that I personally hear from him, but you know what I mean. He got fired because he really advised against you know, keep pushing the attack thing that Putin wants to go with. So he got removed from his position. Uh, Maybe he's still alive. I don't know. Maybe he's chilling. Maybe he was only fired. But also 1/3 each type likely he's in a gulag or he's dead. And Gerasimov, one of the other meme generals, is actually not that dumb. He is possessed by a demon though. He was one of the ones that was like really hyper into all the hospital bombing in Syria stuff. So he's also disappeared from the public eye. Uh, Although I don't remember if he was officially fired or not. I don't think he was officially fired, but he might have been. Anyways, down to the economic stuff. Algeria, after several months of not too much news, Algeria continues with all kinds of stuff. So, at two separate ports, one over in Oran and one over here, I believe, Algeria is nearing completion of several container port expansions as they, are continuing to economically rise and thus continuing to import stuff for themselves and export stuff like just on their own outside of the rapid influx of all this new business that Europe is throwing into them. Uh, that, combined, or both factors now are going to be leading them to, be needing much more port capacity in the future. And they are already on top of that with two new container port expansions. Gigel, that's where the other one is. Uh, One over in Oran and one in Gigel. So those are going to be nearing completion soon. And they are also, let me see if I have, there's one of them at least. They're also doing these bypass tunnels. Basically, they're routes to the highway, the major east-west highway that goes across the country and connects like the major cities. They're doing these sort of alt route things from the ports to that highway to bypass the actual so that cargo going out of those ports elsewhere, not to those immediate cities of Oran and Giselle, can pass like around the city and get to the major highway without having to go into and through those cities and thus add to potential traffic and congestion in those cities. So that's a rare instance of seeing someone like make a wise move preemptively before something becomes a problem, unlike you know, reacting to it after it becomes a problem, like Texas. Also, we have another factory is coming to Algeria, so they've had a lot of influx of manufacturing stuff recently from that Fiat factory to that. I forget what the other car brand was, but one other car brand is going to be manufacturing cars in Algeria now. A European bus manufacturer will be manufacturing cars in Algeria. An Italian manufacturer of heat radiators for homes and apartments will be manufacturing those in Algeria. Uh, an Algerian company themselves is expanding production of AC air conditioning systems. Oh, what else? What else? There were several. There were several other things I can't remember off the top of my head. But now a freight truck company, whatever you call them, 18-wheelers, semis, lorries, I think in most of Europe is what you call them, although that might only be for the smaller ones that are not separate trailers. But a freight truck, a cargo truck manufacturer is now uh, starting starting construction on a plant in Algeria and will be manufacturing their freight trucks there. And what else do we have for Algeria? Oh, yeah, we have uh, nearing completion some of the last bits of this rail line between Tindouf and Bachar, Bekkar. Probably Bachar. Arabic usually the CH I think actually does make the Latin CH sound. But that railway is nearing completion. Some of the work being done was in these pictures here, uh, leveling the grounds and laying the two, or well, they will be laying the two rail tracks in this section after they finish leveling the ground here. That is for uh, transporting the iron from the various iron mines that are going to be opening and expanding in the Tindouf region, as there is a lot of iron ore in there, and demand for iron ore is increasing, along with the fact that some of the more traditional suppliers are going to be becoming problematic. Like uh, globally, we lost a few dozen million tons a year from the Ukraine invasion, and also Russia is starting to not produce as much anymore because a lot of their mines are in this same region, eastern Ukraine and southwestern Russia, because this is where the Iron Belt was. So a lot of those are starting to either produce less or shut down because the mine workers don't really want to work when there's now ATACMS strikes going on across the border. So those are becoming an issue. And as well, China is starting to run into a brick wall on its supply, because it did have a lot of iron up here in this region. However, they have, as you can probably assume yourself through their almost 1 billion tons of steel demand per year, steel consumption, most of which is going kind of nowhere in their whole hollow real estate thing that's now collapsing. But they have just like hyper drained their ground of iron ore up there. So they're running into issues. And there's a number of other spots that are going to be running into issues, like Iran. And I think some of the stuff in Brazil has some issues, but also Mexico is not really expanding their or extending their iron mining like leases and stuff on their bit as well. So there's iron ore, not like really critical issues, but we're not going to be in the like abundant oversupply situation that we have previously been in globally, or at least we wouldn't be if new stuff wasn't being planned and coming into fruition soon, like the various mines in the western portion of Algeria, and expansions in Mauritania and Guinea. Oh, yeah, that's the other issue. Sorry, I forgot. How could I forget? The world's biggest problem child, South Africa, a big miner of iron, but having issues with it, like everybody, like everything else in South Africa. because of the ongoing collapse of their electricity grid and their rail network and their ability to pump and deliver water supplies. It's everything in South Africa is just always going great. So they're an issue now as well. And the unreliability or growing unreliability of their rail network has led to the new Swanamib alliance, I'm going to call it. Uh, Botswana and Namibia are going to join their railroads from Walvis Bay, because the Walvis Bay thing comes all the way out to a smaller town here. And Botswana's railroad does come out to somewhere around here, so it's not too much farther. It will probably take like a year or two, but they're going to join their railways. And Botswana is going to switch over to starting to import a lot of the stuff they have to import and export the stuff that they export through Namibia instead of South Africa because, as everything in South Africa continues breaking down into oblivion, that's not really the reliable option to go with anymore. So Namibia is also going to get a boost from further construction projects and obviously, cargo and mineral ore export transit fees back and forth. What else did we have? Iraq. Within Iraq, they have actually reached a point to where 75% of their population now lives above the internationally defined poverty line, which is, it's kind of ambiguous and really debatable because, what that line actually would be would vary from country to country, value of currency, prices of local goods, whatever. But by the arbitrarily set international poverty line, 75% of Iraq's population is now above it. And also, since we're running out of places, despite the growing instability in Pakistan, the oil and gas industry is re-entering the country and is going to resume oil and gas exploration within Pakistan. As there has been stuff off and on in the past, and there should be some decent bit based on the initially just based on the topography. It looks really good. Geology is not the best, as we've found out, as the industry has found out in the Indian portions of that same basin that they share with Pakistan. So there's not as much there as you might initially expect, or at least it's not as it's not as workable. So there's not some super jumbo amount, but there still should be stuff there. Uh, just I did not click on that. Just hasn't really been all that touched because Pakistan's never been that reliable stability wise, anyways, and is getting worse now, especially with Balochistan starting to go for their independence route, and the Taliban constantly attacking Pakistan border positions and this is now a legitimate theory I'm on, because they had that whole article thing a couple of years ago about how they feel dead and soulless doing general government work and office jobs. I legitimately think the Taliban is actually trying to get Pakistan to either attack them or invade them or start some kind of conflict with them because they just psychologically cannot handle life outside of jihad. Like they don't really know how to live any other way. other than being in some kind of conflict or jihad. So they really seem like they're trying to get Pakistan to attack them because you know even they know they can't just straight up start it themselves because they might not be able to twist the Quran around that much to claim they're the good guys. Plus, also, that it would be better for them stability wise if Pakistan attacks them as opposed to them doing the attacking because they're already dealing with the different groups and tribes within Afghanistan like actively rebelling against them. So it would be better if they did not start it and it was actually the other party. So they seem to be trying to provoke Pakistan into it, but we'll see whether Pakistan actually goes that way. But, anyways, oil and gas exploration will be resuming in Pakistan soon. So, uh, probably, there should be enough there based on past stuff and based on stuff in the neighboring portion of the basin in India. There's probably enough stuff throughout there if it were all pushed and developed for like, uh, another, few 100,000 barrels per day, as opposed to Pakistan's current production, which is less than 100,000. But I doubt that much is going to be like done and found all at once or that quickly. So stuff will probably be found in the near future that will declines included pump Pakistan up briefly in like the later 2020s or early 2030s to like, maybe 150 or a bit higher than that before it resumes going down. Then we go over to Mexico, where they will hit a new record this year as they continue, their renewed economic rising upsurge from all angles, including tourism now, as they're having a renewed tourist boom. And this year, based on the numbers from the first half so far, as long as everything continues as is throughout the second half of the year, uh, revenue from tourists spending money in Mexico will exceed $40 billion for Mexico this year. It was, previously around like 30, and then over the last few years, it has rapidly been climbing up as their number of like tourist visits has gone up by like 20 or 25%. And then for the moment, until Azerbaijan tries to do the whole Armenian genocide 2.0 thing, Armenia is also getting some tourist revenue boost, or will be getting some soon, as additional flights are now coming into Armenia. This time in particular, actually from China, as Chinese tourists, now that China has like, a middle class and an upper middle class brackets that like, for the last 10 plus years have been able to like afford to travel and visit places. Uh, a lot of Chinese tourists are actually interested in Armenia and not just Armenia, but a number of other places. Uh, so they are actually now benefiting a number of places that like did not tend to see like tourism previously from the traditional markets, which was mostly the U.S., Europe, and Japan and South Korea. So Chinese tourists have like some different tastes in their destinations. And I'm not saying Armenia is a bad destination. I would actually love to visit Armenia. I'd love to visit a lot of places, both that I haven't and that I have. But that would require earning money, which I don't really do. So Armenia is actually, like a really beautiful place, especially if you like, just the if you like, the feeling of visiting like really ancient sites and ruins and stuff that have like, been there for 4,000 plus years, where you can really like feel the history and stuff of the ages. Armenia is like a really great place for that because there is an awful lot of stuff of the sort there. So they're going to be getting a boost from that. And where is oh, yeah, Vietnam. Vietnam is not. They are not producing 23 million tons of steel per year, but they have reached now with their newest steel mill construction completions. They've reached the capacity to where they could, and they will eventually be doing so once demand swings over to every possible open door in the blowback from China starting the whole Taiwan thing. So Vietnam only produces around like 10 or 12 at the moment. So they're only operating at half capacity and are predominantly supplying their own demand. But they do have a total capacity of 23 million tons per year. So they could double that up and, start exporting steel when this whole thing starts. And don't be duped by the numbers because you'll see on like a thing, if you look at like global steel manufacturing numbers, you'll see that yeah, China makes a billion tons of steel per year. However, the world does not have to fill a gap of a billion tons of steel because 900 plus million tons of that China consumes itself. So like only about 100 million tons per year is stuff that China exports elsewhere, and those gaps can be filled pretty readily, actually, by a number of people who are up and coming, like India, who is rapidly expanding in steel production, and not just to meet their own demands. They are actually exporting stuff, but as well as Vietnam, uh, Indonesia, several European nations, especially in Eastern Europe, that have had a lot of their stuff on idle for a number of years, because initially after the fall of the Eastern Bloc, when they were really poor in the 90s and early 2000s, they were like the go-to for cheap steel. But then as they economically rose and they got more expensive, the market chased elsewhere and started importing cheaper steel from China. Japan and South Korea both also have actually a lot of spare steel capacity that is just on idle because, they also just do cheaper stuff. And Algeria, even, as I've said in the past, is quickly expanding as a steel producer and is going to be going from 2 up to like 6 or 8 million tons per year within the coming years. And France actually also has a deal of idled capacity, even that they could switch back on. The UK used to, just like it used to have a lot of things, but the UK has consistently, gradually destroyed itself. That seems to be the UK's internal goal, unfortunately. The one other thing is the one bit of not good economic news, or just general news, and that is Tunisia. They, were getting some renewed rain. They recovered from their total national reservoirs only being collectively at 19% full, up to 36%. However, the rain has stopped again. And month after month after month now, they've declined further back down. Now they're down to 29%. Hopefully they'll start getting rain again before they creep down, back under 20% again. But we'll see where that all goes. Then we have the usual Russia-Ukraine stuff, for which I will need to get uh, the map, downloads, streams, load please, thank you. Oops, hold on. One of my keyboard keys popped off. There we go. The map, enlarge, and zoom. So the spots in number and size continue still growing as more strikes are yet still conducted. The most recent, biggest one was at this place in Kalak, in the Volgograd Oblast. A large depot was hit with a pretty decent billowing fire to it. I believe that's the one I actually used as the thumbnail for this. Go through here. Should be able to see pretty quickly. Was it this one? Yeah, Kalak. Okay, so yeah, it was this one. Give me the large version, please. So yeah, another oil and oil product storage depot was hit by beaver drones here, as beaver drones are the primary choice for these deep strikes, which brings up another subject because they are really on both parts, on Ukraine's and our part, NATO's part. We're really playing up this whole like theater thing, basically, of Ukraine being like angry at NATO countries for, or particularly the U.S. for not letting it use or giving it permission to use the ATACMS missiles or HIMARS for strikes deeper into Russia. However, that is literally theater or psyop because the ATACMS is decent and it has, you know, some decent range, but it can't actually reach deep into Russia. So like the targets people were like constantly suggesting, saying it should be used on were like Engels Air Force Base over here, or one of the larger refineries, like, you know, over in Volgograd. However, the ATACMS can't reach those. The restriction that was specified for Ukraine using ATACMS within Russia is that it can only use it in these border regions here, which is not actually a restriction if you know about like the weapons capabilities. So you'll see different types of reactions from like different people who, like, you know, post the stuff like uh, Noel doesn't seem to know about like the different ranges and capabilities of different weapons, as he is upset about the restrictions, even though they're, like I said, not actually restrictions. This guy, uh, the uh, the Czech Czech Republic Giga Chad here, Jakub, he is aware and thus is not one of the like complainers, because the border regions are like the extent of range that ATACMS can really hit. Like the one real exception is over here in Oriol, where my friend is from. Actually, uh, it could hit like this portion of Oriol, but that's like about it, and maybe like this little chunk here of Lipetsk. But like so the quote unquote restrictions are theater because we restricted them to, you know, you're only allowed to use ATACMS on targets that are within the firing range that ATACMS can reach. So it's a funny word trick to, you know, publicly place restrictions without actually placing restrictions, because they're restricted to using it on targets that it's capable of reaching. They're they're, you know, not allowed to use it on targets that are completely out of its range that it couldn't reach anyways. So for if you like are watching, any of that like debate going on, just know that is completely theater. All right, what else do we have for other goings? Oh yeah, the Voronezh ammunition depot here in Voronezh. Uh, I don't know what they decided to do or why, because it's really dumb. But Russia decided to go back to the just pile everything together on the base before sending it into Ukraine strategy. So like uh, artillery shells, regular bullets, tank rounds, mortar rounds, MLRS, rocket artillery things, missiles for SAM systems and or aircraft. They just massively piled everything at this one base. I think this is the time lapse. Seeing it messed up afterwards. Yeah, everything's fried. Some of the actual fire stuff. And where's the first one? Right, where's the on? I want to make sure. Okay, no, I don't have the initial impact one bookmarked, but like it started like this. So they hit one spot. Okay, they just hit a spot on the base, but everything was just so clustered and piled in like mounds on top of each other that it kept blowing and cooking itself over and over. And it, went on for at first hours. You can see now there's two separate smoke things as stuff blew up in the first one and hopped by the explosion over into like a neighboring pile and started blowing up that stuff. And then we uh, we got into, wow, this is really small. Can we enlarge this at least? Thank you. So then it turned into all of this with a big kaiju face. You can see that there also. So it turned into all of this because they just had so much stuff piled there that it just kept blowing and going boom. And it lasted for several straight days. And there was all kinds of different stuff. You could see at different points. Like I think this is the one where you can see what's clearly rockets ammo or MLRS ammo because you can see the fireworks streaks or streamers that spray up from it. I think this dude, get a better cam. Okay, never mind. Sorry, I apologize, Mr. Random Russian Filmer. I thought your camera sucked, but you were just taking a minute to focus. No, don't turn it sideways, man. Come on. Why do you got to do this? There you go. You see that right there? That's where the MLRS ammo lights off. Although I'm back to being harsh on this filmer though, because you never turn it sideways. Never do that. Completely unprofessional. Also, uh, another way Russia is getting around potential number issues is by sending. This is one dude of example uh, to like demonstrate the types of like injuries we mean when we say they're wounded. They are actually now sending their wounded back into frontline combat. So this is potentially just to plug numbers for extra meat. Maybe hoping Ukraine will run out of ammunition if they have to kill enough dudes. Uh, Also, more likely, it's financially motivated because if it's better for Russia if the guys die because they then won't have to pay out those like you know equivalent of couple hundred thousand US dollar injured in action bonuses they promised. So it's financially better for them if the guys don't come back. And also, the whole sovereign wealth fund thing is much lower than initially expected, as I had calculated that it had been dropped, depleted all the way down to like around 80 or under 80 billion. Uh, Other calculations, which had because the Russian government officially stated that no, it was still up at 120 billion. Other calculations came out recently that it was around like 60 or the upper 50s, and now most recently, some of the people in Russia's finance ministry uh, accidentally, like they've done with a number of other things over the course of time, accidentally let it slip that it's actually even slightly lower than that at around 53 or 54. Now that's still enough to, carry them through until financially like summer of next year, uh, minus any potential sudden upsurges of oil and gas prices by like an order of magnitude. But that would still carry them through until like summer of next year. And then, at that point, like I've said before many times, they could start selling off their national gold reserves. But, that would be really undesirable because if you do that, that kind of signals that, your back's against a wall and usually then will trigger like financial panic internally. But it is an option that they could turn to, which could buy them like another year or two after that. What else did we have here? Oh, okay. Yeah, we had the public opinion continues shifting internally. Uh, Keep in mind, this is not Russians like self-actualizing and saying like we were in the wrong to invade Ukraine. That's not the question. That's not the like the statement or opinion that's being discussed in the Russian-based polling results. The the opinion in discussion is just like was just phrased to people as like do you want Putin to stop? Do you want do you want him to just like say all right say all right that's it, we did it, let's call it quits. Uh, that percentage has now actually exceeded 50% among the population. It's actually almost at 60 and has hit 58% as of this week that is now ending. Whereas there was the 25 or 30% of the population that was like always in opposition from the beginning, or at least 25% that was vocally in opposition. And the other 70 or 75% would either, not respond or say no opinion, or would say, no, we should continue. However, a mix of people that previously said we should continue or who were undecided or who gave no response have now been consistently turning over into no, this is enough, right? It's time to call it off. So that opinion is actually nearing 60%. Uh, Again, that's not the it was wrong or right question, because the actual like Russian like organization polls don't typically do that unless they know they're going to get the answer they want. But the should we just stop now thing that has been skyrocketing mostly since the start of this year. The previous numbers that were at the start of the like in the few weeks or months after the start of the war, those held steady, like really steady until this year. Over the first half of this year is where they've suddenly gone up a curve into the no, it's time to stop category. So I don't know what particular threshold among the population might be getting hit. If it's just like if there was like a timer they were on that now is shifting them, or if some magical casualty number has actually been reached, or if it is just the amount of actual consequences happening on like Russian soil spiking over the first half of this year. I mean, that probably, I would think that's actually probably the most likely one because, like, the huge chunk of strikes within Russia on Ukraine's part have, like, the predominant majority of them over the entire war have been within the first half of this year. So I would figure that is probably one of the biggest contributors. Although, again, there might also be just some magic numbers that might have been reached. And outside of the war, just regarding Russia's oil and stuff in general, because, you know, the outside oil industry left in the wake of this. So Russia's been on its own. And as we discussed, they can't really hold it together on their own. The non-Arctic, non-Siberia, non-permafrost stuff, all the normal conventional stuff that they have left, that they can hold on their own just fine. However, the remaining production from that stuff is a lot lower than it was in the 90s. It's probably down at like 4 or less than 4 million barrels a day by now. So Russia, as I said in the most recent latest oil productions update video, is now down to around 9.1 as of their last numbers not released because they stopped officially publishing data, even though they still state their numbers at the OPEC meetings and then OPEC publishes that data. So again, like this is another weird act of like there's no point in you not officially publishing your data because everyone can still get the data anyways. But all of the sudden, over this last week, they abruptly have now dropped by about 400,000 or more, it seems. So down to like 8.7. And I have not been able to find a reason for that. There haven't been any like storms anywhere. There hasn't been no volcanoes erupted, no asteroid hit anything. There wasn't any tsunami up on their Arctic coastline. They just abruptly have dropped down 400,000. And when stuff has like randomly exploded, like when pipelines and infrastructure out there has randomly exploded, we have gotten that. They don't actually really try to conceal that particular stuff. So there's been none of that. So like, I'm wondering if that is just another further, shutdown of stuff because they were about to lose it to degradation anyways. Wait a few more weeks and we'll see if they switch that back on or if it stays offline and they are just now down from 9.1 to 8.7 from here on in until they drop it further. But for the immediate moment, they have abruptly lowered themselves down from 9.1 to 8.7. So we will see what's up with that. And I should check chat. The Dagestan stuff. I forgot the like civilian death toll from that, but I know there. I think there were double-digit people who died in that, but that was three separate cities in Dagestan where some radical Islamist groups shot up some public places, and then they had a shootout with Rovsgardia when they showed up. There was actually another one that came after that. A few days after that, I'm pretty sure it was in the capital Dagestan again, where it was. Don't do this to me, Google Earth. Thank you. There was another one where it was a dude went into not like a building like a restaurant or a theater or whatever like it was in those three events. It was just like kind of the middle of the street, if I remember correctly. It was like an intersection, and just started shooting some people. That one didn't like work out really well for the terrorists. They only got like two or three people before they then got themselves. So there was another one like almost immediately after that. Since then, there hasn't really been anything. So thankfully, there's not like, an ongoing series. Like there was an initial fear that that was about to suddenly turn into one every like once a week thing. But thankfully, that looks like that was just those two back to back, and now it's somewhat quiet again. But we'll see if things abruptly change. And I'm checking other stuff. Ah, yes, forgot about the railway stuff. If I can find it, there it is. So, also, a group inside of Russia, whether Russian dissidents themselves or whether Ukrainians who are inside of Russia, or whether some of like the separatist groups from the regions that have wanted out forever, like Dagestan and Chechnya and Kalmykia. This group is now more and more frequently burning these railway switch relay boxes, which you might think initially, well, it's a metal box. The fire's not going to burn it down. It's not made of wood. Indeed, the fire is not going to burn down a metal box, but the fire will, however, melt the electronics that are inside of that box that, control the signals to and from the train directory center, wherever it is, to like switch tracks or control like the train signals that the trains receive as they're going. So the Russian railway network within the immediate vicinity of eastern Ukraine, at least in this general area, is continually now seeing this form of sabotage. This is ironically what is, destroying South Africa's railway from a different angle, not from people burning the stuff and melting the electronics, but in South Africa, it's from criminal gangs ripping open the boxes and, stealing the electronics so that they can sell the precious metals on the black market. But in Russia, they're just burning it, which, melts the electronics because a lot of the precious metals and the soldering, on computer boards, on circuit boards and stuff in electronics, a lot of those things have really low melting temperatures. So, even just your basic average fire it's gonna screw the whole thing over. And they have been trying to keep up with cruise missile barrages, but they are brick wall running, by which I mean they are visibly having to do them in smaller waves than they did in the past because they've hit that, not really negotiable numbers point. As of now, since the start of the war, they have expended 4,500 cruise missiles. They started the war with 4,000 on hand. And since the start of the war, assuming their factories have operated 24/7 and at maximum efficiency, which we know isn't the case anyways, because one of them was actually severely damaged in a cross border strike at one point. And another one was slightly damaged in a drone attack, but not like too severely. But anyways, benefit of the doubt is they've manufactured 1,600 plus additional ones since the start of the war, 1,610 around of sorts. So that would be 5,610 net total, of which they've expended 4,500. So that would leave, in theory, 1,110 remaining as of today, which, would, initially you would think, okay, so, they can probably still fire off a few hundred more without carrying. However, there's an issue to remember here. Russia, its Black Sea fleet is kind of useless now, obviously, but it has other fleets in the Baltic, in the Atlantic slash North oceans, and in the Pacific. Its Pacific fleet is really small and not impressive. As I learned when I was, working on the plot and military arrangements that everyone does in the 48-hour like window of warning that we get before the aliens actually start landing. Because I figured, okay, there'd be some coordination between U.S. naval forces around Japan, the Japanese Navy, and the Russian Pacific Fleet could like come over. And then I found out there's not really a Russian Pacific Fleet. There's a few vessels. It's not exactly a fleet, but it still counts because those few vessels do have cruise missiles in their cruise missile launching silos. So they have all their other fleets that, carry cruise missiles in their launchers. And so, they kind of want to keep those there in case they, maybe have to use those. And in total, all those other non Black Sea vessels, the cruise missiles on board those total up to about 400. So that would, instead of 1110, mean that they have 710 free to use cruise missiles remaining. But, as I was asking the question previously, what is the minimum threshold they would want to get down to? How much is it worth to keep bombing children's hospitals like they did a few days ago? Uh, how low are they willing to actually bring that freehand number down to? And I figured minimum they would probably still want to keep 200 air-launched cruise missiles around at maybe their bases in Syria and just other air bases just around in general. So I figured then out of that 710, maybe maybe about 500, they would be willing to totally just cut that down. But it seems like they've actually hit a wall, and the 400 in their other fleets and the 700 predominantly air launched that they still have on hand outside of those fleets, because those are obviously ship launched. It seems like maybe 600 or 700 is actually the floor that the Russian command staff has decided on. That's they're not willing to go below having that many on hand. So the launches have, started to get sparse. The number of missiles launched in each barrage when they do one, instead of like 30 or 40 at a time, is now like between 5 and 15. So it seems we've reached an apparent floor, and it's a more intelligent floor than, I was initially going to give them credit for. I thought they really were just going to keep throwing it, like I said, until they only had a total of 600 remaining, uh, or in other words, until they whittled the 700 air launched ones down to only 200. But it seems like 600 or 700 for the air launched, because they can't use those 400 ship launched ones because they're in fleets, far away. It seems like that's actually the floor that they are not willing to take their stockpile below, which is good, obviously, because that means they're gonna potentially be having to restrict themselves to like 60 or 70 launch cruise missiles per month or so, assuming their factories continue at the current rate and don't suffer from power outages or get hit by beaver drone strikes themselves. So we will see how that goes further. Anything from chat? Nothing further. And then Sudan, it's kind of the last thing we have, and it's not the best news. So, civil war has been going on for over a year in Sudan. For those unaware of this situation, there were two generals. They couped the previous military dictator. They agreed to coup him together as, strength in numbers, and, fight each other for the seat of power afterwards. Well, they ousted him. They waited a little bit, and last year, they reached the end of their timer, their countdown, and started fighting each other to, see who gets to claim the country. And that's been ongoing for a year now, and it has massively disrupted food aid and medicine shipments throughout the, heavily impoverished nation. Yeah, and it's also really, kept actual like statistics type people out as well. So we haven't really been able to get, specific data. However, we do have, the stacked up numbers now in a very broad sense. The median middle of the road estimate is from starvation and lack of, common medicine. The civilian death toll in Sudan from that is now around 200,000 over the last year. The majority of which are children, of course, because that's how it goes. But these two dudes don't care. They just want to fight to see who gets to sit on their imaginary throne in Khartoum. So they're just going to keep that going until one of them wins somehow. Also, over here in the Darfur region, we don't have any like death totals from that, but they've been doing massacres. The different groups have been doing massacres over there, left and right. You know, wiping out whole villages and towns. So there's probably thousands of people that have died over there from that. But again, none of those groups really the different like factions like let any of the different aid organizations or UN groups like enter to like ask about anything or measure the size of the different mass graves that they find. So we have a broad estimate that's uh, probably an undercount, honestly. But middle ground of that estimate, which is probably an undercount, is consequence deaths from this civil war in Sudan, predominantly from starvation and lack of basic medicine from all the disruptions of aid, is probably around 200,000 people. Uh, you know, the not like 90% being children, but like the largest portion being children. Probably I would say probably like half or more. But nobody's like really letting anybody do anything to try to like help the people. So there's no actual like good sides in this case. There like it is a two-sided civil war predominantly between those two dudes, both of whom are evil. But then there's also the different like factions down in the southwest and around Darfur, uh, where it's just a mess. Like when Somalia was, back in the 90s and 2000s when Somalia was being Somalia, and there were like 12 different sides, different tribes and clans. Thankfully, Somalia has, you know, they just hit a mental or social switch in the mid to late 2010s where like I guess collectively the majority of them after like all this time just decided, you know, let's stop. And they, stopped. Al-Shabaab and the different like Islamist militant groups didn't stop, obviously. But now, there's a literal like unified Somali national army and Somali security forces from the previously different like warring groups within Somalia. So I would hope, I will pray that something similar, some abrupt mental switch, like happens with all those like fractured groups. The two guys like fighting for predominant control over Sudan, though, they're just gonna carry that out until the end, until one of them either wipes out the other's forces or like kills the other. And neither of them really has any kind of superiority. So it's a really, really like straight even fight, which is kind of the worst case scenario, which means because that means it's going to drag on. And that is about where it ends. I don't really have that much else, at least that much else that I feel like going into because I've overran the time I thought I was going to do this by like almost an hour. So unless anything else shows up from chat, comments or super chats or anything, that will be where I call it. So I'll just wait for the usual like 30-second time delay to see if anything shows up. Otherwise, that is where it will end this time. Drink some water. Wait, see. Yeah, wait a few seconds, but then probably this is going to be it. And then what do I have coming up video wise? OPEC, monthly oil demands, natural gas production levels, because I've been neglecting that for a while. Video formats of the BP statistical energy review data. So I did the stream for that, but I need to do the individual video presentations for that. And oh yeah, and I'll post the natural resource risk rules and stuff. But it doesn't look like anything else is coming from chat. So that